Hello there, and welcome back. Tonight we are going to drift slowly through the entire lore of Hollow Knight, Silksong, from Hornet's first capture to the hidden history of Pharloom, from Silk and Song to the Citadel, the Weavers, Grandmother Silk, Lace, the Abyss, and the strange final meaning of Hornet's journey. This is a story about a kingdom that sings while it suffers, a holy city that shines while it consumes, and a princess protector from another fallen land who is forced to climb through someone else's web until she understands that the web has been tied to her blood all along. So settle in gently. Let the world grow quiet. Let Pharloom rise slowly in the dark, with its bells ringing far above, its pilgrims moving upward, and its old secrets waiting in silk. Before Silksong begins, Hornet already carries the history of Hallownest inside her. In Hollow Knight, she is the daughter of Hera the Beast, one of the 3 dreamers who sealed the Hollow Knight inside the Black Egg, and the Pale King, the Pale Ruler whose failed plan doomed countless children to the Abyss. Hornet is therefore not simply a warrior with a needle. She is part weaver, part pale lineage, part royal consequence, and part surviving witness to Hallownest's ruin. She has seen a kingdom destroyed by a godly infection. She has seen the cost of divine control. She has seen children made into tools. That matters deeply when she reaches Pharloom, because Pharloom is another kingdom where gods, rulers and holy systems have turned living bugs into instruments. Hornet's first role in Hallownest was protection. She guarded the kingdom's deeper truths, tested the night, and eventually helped open the way toward the Abyss and the Black Egg's final mystery. But Silksong removes her from that familiar duty. She is captured by outsider bugs and carried away in a cage toward a distant kingdom called Pharloom, a land described by official materials as ruled by Silk and Song, haunted, fallen and crowned by a shining citadel. This opening is important because Hornet begins Silksong not as a traveller choosing adventure, but as a prisoner being transported for reasons she does not yet understand. The story begins by taking away her direction, so that she has to win it back step by step. The cage breaks before Hornet reaches the place her captors intended. She falls into the lower reaches of Pharloom and begins the long ascent. This movement upward is the central shape of Silksong. Hollow Knight often felt like descent, down through forgotten crossroads, fungal caverns, ancient basin, palace ruins, and finally the Abyss. Silksong turns the motion around. Hornet climbs. She moves from low caves and ruined settlements toward bells, pilgrims, towers, vaults, and the citadel above. But the upward movement is not simple hope. In Pharloom, higher does not always mean holier. The higher Hornet climbs, the closer she comes to the system that has been draining the land beneath it. Pharloom is not an empty kingdom waiting for Hornet. It has its own history, its own gods, its own ruined powers, and its own exhausted people. The land is shaped around pilgrimage. Bugs are drawn upward by bells, faith, hunger, rumour, and the promise of the citadel. Some want holiness. Some want cure. Some want purpose. Some barely seem to know why they climb at all. The path through Pharloom feels like a sacred road, but it is also a conveyor belt. The kingdom has learned how to turn longing into movement. That is one of Silksong's most important ideas. A holy call can feel beautiful from far away, while still leading living creatures into servitude. At the root of Pharloom's mystery is silk itself. Silk is not only thread, cloth or weapon material. In Silksong, silk behaves almost like soul, memory, power, medicine, and law at the same time. It can heal, bind, extend life, form tools, shape runes, and connect beings across distance. Hornet uses silk naturally because of her weaver heritage, but Pharloom has built an entire civilization around silk's extraction and control. This makes the title of the game more than poetic. Silksong is about the joining of two forces: silk, the substance of binding and creation, and song, the sound of devotion, control, and ritual. Together, they sustain the Citadel and imprison what lies at its heart. The being at that heart is Grandmother Silk, a pale, ancient higher power tied to the primal origin of silk. She is not simply a final boss placed at the top of the map. She is the hidden centre around which Pharloom has been organised for ages. The bugs of the Citadel may not fully understand her. Pilgrims may not even know her name. But the kingdom's shining holiness is built around her sleeping body. Her silk is harvested. Her power is contained. Her presence is hidden behind symbols, songs, rites, and layers of religious language. Pharloom's beauty is therefore inseparable from exploitation. The holy city shines because something living has been bound beneath its song. Grandmother Silk belongs to the larger pattern of pale beings in the Hollow Knight universe. Pale beings are powerful, luminous, and capable of shaping kingdoms, but they are rarely innocent. The Pale King used his subjects, his children, and the Void in a desperate attempt to contain the Radiance. The White Lady participated in the creation of the vessels, even if her later remorse is clear. Grandmother Silk is another pale power, and her presence raises the same uneasy question. What happens when divine beings decide that smaller lives exist to serve the design of a higher will? Hornet's journey through Pharloom becomes personal, because she is tied to that same pale inheritance, yet she increasingly rejects the pattern of domination it represents. Long before Hornet arrives, Pharloom appears to have contained several older powers and peoples. The land was not born as the Citadel's property. There were warrior orders, ant tribes, plant-like powers, border kingdoms, hunters, blade bugs, and communities whose remains still lie scattered through the map. These older powers matter because they show that Pharloom once had many centres. The Citadel did not simply rise over empty ground. It rose over a contested land. Its song became the loudest voice only after other voices were weakened, absorbed, ruined, or pushed into memory. The kingdom Hornet enters is therefore already the aftermath of conquest. One of those older powers is Crust King Khan, a ruler associated with blade bugs, hunters, and a kingdom eroded by time and sand. Khan's remains and memory suggest a martial culture that once held great territory before being reduced to relics. His story is not fully spelled out, but that incompleteness is part of Hollow Knight's language. A corpse, a tower, a title, a memory battle, and a few old references can imply an entire vanished order. Khan represents the kind of authority that stood before the Citadel's total claim. His old strength becomes one of the hearts Hornet may seek later, proof that Pharloom's present power is built over buried rivals. Another old power is Scarsinger Carmelita, tied to the Scar, an ant-like people who once had a queen and a collective song of their own. By the time Hornet finds them, that older unity has decayed. Carmelita remains, but withered, diminished, and surrounded by the sense that a former people have lost the centre that gave them direction. Her title matters, Scarsinger. Song existed in Pharloom before the Citadel's sacred machinery claimed it. The Citadel did not invent song. It captured song's social power and turned it toward its own purpose. Carmelita's faded presence reminds us that a song can unite a people before another power twists singing into obedience. Nihilith, the plant-like force connected to Shellwood, gives Pharloom a different kind of ancient life. Where Can suggests martial rule and Carmelita suggests communal song, Nihilith suggests growth, seed, root, and organic memory. Shellwood remains one of the places where life has not been completely flattened by the Citadel's hunger. It still feels full of growth, moisture, and strange natural presence. Nihilith's old heart later becomes important because it is not merely power. It is the memory of Pharloom as something living before holy industry, and silk extraction bent the land toward the Citadel. Verdania, the ruined borderland associated with twin princes, adds another tragedy. One prince appears to have offered himself as tribute, hoping sacrifice might spare the land from destruction. But the sacrifice fails. Verdania still falls. This small story echoes the larger Hollow Knight universe, where sacrificial logic rarely saves anything cleanly. The Pale King sacrifices children to contain the Radiance, and their plan fails. Verdania offers a life to appease power, and ruin still comes. Silksong is deeply suspicious of salvation purchased through another being's body. Again and again, the game asks whether sacrifice chosen under domination is truly holy, or only another name for despair. Above Pharloom there was once a surface town, now abandoned. Its remains suggest that people were drawn downward by promises from the Weavers, the spider-like children of Grandmother Silk. This is one of the first hints that Pharloom's web reaches beyond the land's visible borders. The Weavers did not only build with silk, they beckoned, they attracted, they whispered of something below. The abandoned town becomes a quiet warning. The Citadel's call is not merely local. It can seduce those above, draw them into the holy road, and leave the surface emptied behind them. The Weavers are central to Silksong because they connect Hornet to Pharloom more deeply than she first knows. In Hollow Knight, the Weavers are associated with Hera, Deep Nest, strange silk arts, and a culture that withdrew from Hallownest. Silksong reveals or strongly implies that Pharloom is their ancestral domain, and that their relationship to Grandmother Silk is far older and more troubling than simple worship. They are her children, or at least her descendants, but they are also the architects of the system that keeps her asleep. This turns Hornet's ancestry into a moral inheritance. Her bloodline is not only noble or exotic, it is implicated. Hera the Beast, Hornet's mother, becomes even more important in this light. In Hollow Knight, Hera is one of the Dreamers, a queen of Deep Nest who agrees to sleep in order to seal the Hollow Knight, but only after receiving a child from the Pale King. Hornet is that child. Hera's role already tied Hornet to sacrifice, politics, motherhood, and kingdom-scale bargains. Silksong adds another layer. Hera was a weaver, connected to a people whose own mother was bound in slumber by song. Hornet is therefore born from two histories of sleeping powers and sacrificial systems. Her mother slept to preserve Hallownest's seal. Grandmother Silk sleeps to sustain Pharloom's holy order. Hornet stands between those legacies. The Citadel of Song is the great image of Pharloom's power. It is beautiful, shining, high above the lower lands, and spoken of with reverence by pilgrims. but beauty in Silksong is never automatically trustworthy. The Citadel is both church and machine. It gathers devotion, labour, silk, song, and bodies. It turns faith into power. The closer Hornet comes to it, the clearer it becomes that the Holy City is not simply a place of worship. It is a system designed to sustain itself, hide its true purpose, and keep Grandmother Silk bound in sleep while the weavers and later rulers benefit from the order built around her cocoon. The bells of Pharloom are important because they turn sound into direction. A bell can call, warn, gather, announce, or sanctify. In Silksong, bells are tied to pilgrimage and movement. When they ring, bugs hear the call and begin to travel. The bell shrines feel peaceful at first, but their function is ambiguous. Are they guiding the lost, or summoning more bodies into the Citadel's path? The same sound can be comfort and trap. This is one of Silksong's recurring patterns. The things that look sacred often have a second function hidden underneath. Pilgrimage is one of the game's most powerful ideas. A pilgrim usually travels because they believe the destination will transform them. In Pharloom, that belief is exploited. Bugs climb through dangerous lands because the Citadel promises holiness, healing, reward, or belonging. But arrival does not mean freedom. It often means new service. The holy path becomes a filter that brings the faithful upward, strips them down through hardship, and delivers them to a system that can use their voices and bodies. This makes Pharloom's religion tragic rather than simply false. The pilgrim's longing is real. The system that feeds on it is cruel. The underworks reveal the Citadel's cruelty at its most direct. Below the shining upper structures, bugs labour in harsh conditions. Rest cost rosaries. Confession becomes automated discipline. Work is framed as purification. The poor are taught that their suffering helps the Citadel breathe. This is not subtle, but it is effective because it connects spiritual language to economic exploitation. Pharloom does not merely force labour through chains. It teaches workers to understand labour as holiness. That is much harder to escape, because the prison has been built inside belief. Loam, the bug endlessly working in hope of a holy reward, is one of the clearest examples of internalized exploitation. Loam does not simply fear punishment. Loam believes the work is right, necessary, and spiritually meaningful. The sadness is that this belief gives dignity to suffering while also making escape almost unthinkable. Hornet can see the cruelty from outside, but bugs inside the system have been taught to call that cruelty purpose. This is why the Citadel is so powerful. It does not only command bodies, it shapes the stories those bodies tell about why they are tired. The slab, Pharloom's prison complex, deepens this idea through guilt. Prisoners are not merely locked away, they are told they are penitents. The old penitent's refusal to leave is heartbreaking because it shows that a cell can become holy in the prisoner's own mind. If someone believes shame requires confinement, then unlocking the door may not be enough. This slab is one of Silksong's darkest images because it turns punishment into identity. The prisoner does not only suffer under the Citadel, he helps defend the meaning of his suffering, because without that meaning, he would have to face the possibility that his pain was simply used. The jailers of the slab are also trapped. Their caste carries inherited guilt for a forgotten sacrilege, and service becomes the only path to supposed absolution. This is a brutally elegant piece of world building. The Citadel does not need each generation to commit a new crime. It can make guilt hereditary. It can turn ancestry into sentence. The jailers are oppressors, but they are also born into a system that tells them their only hope is to keep oppressing others. Silksong is full of these cruel loops: servant and prisoner, believer and victim, singer and cage, child and instrument. The squirm near the blasted steps show another form of holy conditioning. They are raised to judge pilgrims and block those bearing sin from entering sacred halls. Their language of being chosen sounds joyous, almost innocent, but their task is violent. This is one of the game's most unsettling contrasts. A creature can sing about service while preparing to crush another bug in the name of purity. Pharloom's holiness does not need hatred to become dangerous. It can use obedience, simplicity, and the cheerful certainty of being chosen. The Vaultborn and Vault Keepers add yet another layer to the Citadel system. The Whispering Vaults are places of records, psalms, hidden melodies, and controlled knowledge. In many kingdoms, archives preserve truth. In Pharloom, the vaults help bury it. The melody that imprisons Grandmother Silk is not common knowledge. It is held jealously by high religious authority. This matters because control of knowledge is as important as control of labour. The Citadel survives by deciding who may sing, who may read, who may know, and who must simply obey. Greymore shows how the Citadel's demands reach down into ordinary land use. It was once a place of farming and food, but the Citadel redirected its people toward catching and respooling silk dregs. That change is quietly devastating. A community that grew nourishment is turned toward maintaining the holy machine above it. Food becomes secondary to silk. Survival becomes secondary to service. The result is a poorer, stranger, more degraded landscape. Silksong uses this kind of environmental storytelling beautifully. When a ruling system is cruel enough, even farming patterns and swamp air begin to carry the evidence. Bialwater is another scar left by the Citadel. Waste and exhaust are rerouted downward, poisoning a region and shaping the anger of the Stillkin. This makes the Citadel's vertical structure morally clear. The beautiful heights dump their filth below. The upper world sings, while lower places choke. That is not only environmental storytelling, it is political geography. Pharloom is arranged like a hierarchy, and pollution follows that hierarchy. The low places pay for the shine of the high places. The Stillkin's hostility makes more sense when seen through that history. They are not simply swamp enemies in a hostile zone. They are a people living in the consequences of someone else's sacred industry. Their traps and suspicion reflect a land that has been poisoned and exploited. Silksong often hides sympathy behind danger. A group may attack Hornet yet still be responding to real harm. That does not make every action noble, but it keeps the world from becoming simple. Pharloom is full of victims who have learned to become frightening. The Pinstresses represent another group crushed by the Citadel. Once an order of skilled pin-wielding maidens, they were eventually turned against, scattered, and nearly erased. Their surviving members show two possible aftermaths. One remains tied to the old martial identity, while Seamstress chooses stitching and repair over violence. This contrast is tender. A needle or pin can kill, but it can also mend. Hornet herself carries a needle, so the Pinstress history reflects her own duality. Is she a weapon, a stitcher, a ruler, a liberator, or something that refuses a single function? The Deep Docks and Forge Home histories show how the Citadel pulls specialised labour into its orbit. Bugs are promised esteem, duty, and holy importance, then used for the needs of the city above. Fire, metal, machinery, and industry sit beneath silk and song. The Citadel may present itself as sacred, but sacred systems still require material workers. Someone must forge, build, carry, maintain, punish, and repair. Silksong is very aware of this. Every shining holy structure has an underworld of labour below it. The bulletin warning against unsanctioned deaths reveals one of the Citadel's coldest principles. A serving bug must not die because death interrupts service. This is not compassion, it is ownership. The system wants bodies preserved for usefulness, not for dignity. In a gentler kingdom, preventing death would be mercy. In Pharloom, even life extension can become exploitation if it exists only to keep work continuing. This is part of the horror of Silk's power. Healing and binding are close together, and the difference depends on who controls the thread. The Citadel's true purpose, as Mask Maker helps reveal, is not worship in the innocent sense, it is a cage. The weavers built a system of song and prayer to keep Grandmother Silk asleep, using the faith and toil of Pharloom's bugs as the mechanism of imprisonment. This revelation changes everything. The pilgrims are not only victims of a false religion, their devotion has been turned into architecture. Their voices are bars, their prayers are chains, their labour is part of the lock. The kingdom sings because the song keeps its hidden mother bound. Pharloom's Folly, the poem connected to the game's central myth, frames this tragedy in dreamlike language. The bugs see beauty and peace, but forget the heart bound in slumber and servitude. The poem warns that when Grandmother Silk wakes, her true nature will be revealed. This is not a simple prophecy of evil. It is a statement about repression. Something powerful has been bound for ages while others build a holy identity around her captivity. When that power wakes, the truth cannot remain decorative. The beast beneath the song must finally be faced. The image of Grandmother Silk inside the cradle is one of the strongest images in Silksong's lore. She sleeps in a cocoon while strands of silk are drawn from her and fed into the system around her. The symbol of the cocoon becomes a sacred image for the kingdom, but the reality beneath the symbol is extraction. This is how Pharloom works. It turns a bound body into a holy sign, then asks everyone to worship the sign instead of asking what has happened to the body. Hornet's Climb gradually strips that symbol back to its cruelty. The sacred psalm and the melody hidden in the whispering vaults suggest that song is not merely ceremonial, it has power. In Hollow Knight, dreams, minds, infection, and essence were forms of invisible force. In Silksong, sound and silk take that role. A melody can sustain a prison, a song can draw pilgrims, a needle-in can awaken memories and reveal hidden truths. Music in Pharloom is never only music, it is lore, lure, key, weapon, prayer and memory. This is why the title's second word matters so deeply. The pilgrims do not seem to know the truth of Grandmother Silk. Many pray to the weavers, or to the Citadel's holy order, without understanding that the system exists to imprison the very being whose power sustains it. This ignorance is essential. If the ordinary bugs knew the full truth, devotion might become doubt. The Citadel survives by separating ritual from origin. Bugs know what to do, where to climb, how to sing, how to work, how to confess. but not why the entire machine truly exists. A system can last for ages when obedience survives after memory has been removed. The Weaver's role is morally complex. They may have bound Grandmother Silk to free themselves from her domination, or to rule in her place, or both. If Grandmother Silk's nature is conquest, then resisting her might have been necessary. But the system they created became monstrous in its own right. This is one of Silksong's most interesting moral knots. A prison built to contain tyranny can become a tyranny. A cage made to protect a kingdom can consume the kingdom. The Weavers may have solved one problem by creating another, and Hornet inherits both. Hornet's ancestry makes that inheritance personal. She is not an outsider who can judge Pharloom from a clean distance. Her Weaver blood ties her to the architects of the cage. Her pale blood ties her to beings whose power often bends toward domination. Her Hallownest history ties her to another failed divine plan. Pharloom forces Hornet to confront not only a foreign kingdom, but the recurring patterns in her own lineage. She has to decide whether she will continue those patterns, replace one ruler with another, or cut the thread entirely. Lace enters this story as Hornet's rival, reflection, and eventual sister-like figure. At first, Lace appears as an elegant, dangerous opponent connected to Pharloom's upper order. She is graceful, sharp, and dismissive. Her fights with Hornet feel like duels between two different daughters of Silk. Lace belongs to Pharloom's system in ways Hornet does not yet understand, but she is also not simply a loyal servant. Like many characters in Silksong, she is trapped inside a role given by ancestry, design, and expectation. Lace is important because she shows another version of being made for a purpose. Hornet was born from Hera and the Pale King, shaped by Hallownest's politics, yet she has always fought to define herself through action. Lace is tied to Grandmother Silk, created or shaped as a daughter within Pharloom's pale silk lineage. Her frailty and resentment become crucial later. She does not simply oppose Hornet because she is evil. She opposes because she carries her own wound, the bitterness of being made in a form she experiences as insufficient, fragile, or controlled. The relationship between Hornet and Lace gradually shifts from rivalry to recognition. Their early encounters are hostile, but rivalry can reveal kinship before affection does. Both are daughters of powerful, dangerous lineages. Both are skilled, proud, and bound to kingdoms shaped by older beings. Both resist being reduced to instruments. By the true ending, Lace's choice to cut Hornet free from the Void Trap is not sentimental in a simple way, but it is meaningful. She acts against her mother, against the expected flow of the system, and in that act becomes more than the role she was given. To understand how a kingdom could produce both Lace and the Citadel, it helps to return to Pharloom's lower opening, where the story's shape appears before the holy city ever explains itself. Hornet does not wake in a throne room, a temple, or a battlefield full of clear declarations. She wakes among growth, stone, strange small creatures, and the sensation of having been dropped into a world already damaged by a power above her. Moss Grotto feels soft compared with the later machinery of the Citadel, yet that softness is not innocence. It is the kingdom's edge, the place where the holy system has not completely crushed the land but has already begun to influence the paths, the creatures, and the direction of travel. This is where Pharloom first breathes, close to soil, close to root, close to bugs who do not yet understand why everything in their world seems to be leaning upward. Moss is an important image because it resists the sharpness of silk. Silk pulls into lines, snares, needles, stitches and bindings. Moss spreads quietly, unevenly, as if life itself is trying to cover over wounds without asking permission. When Hornet begins in places of moss and green, the story is not only beginning below the Citadel, it is beginning near the kingdom's older patience, the slow living matter that exists before doctrine turns everything into purpose. That contrast matters later, when the Citadel's high rooms feel polished, sanctified, and arranged. Pharloom's lower life has a looser rhythm. It does not always explain itself. It simply grows, clings, and survives. Hornet's climb therefore begins with the reminder that the kingdom was alive before its church claimed the right to define life. The early road also introduces the idea that travel in Pharloom is never purely practical. A path is not only a route from one chamber to another, it is a social and spiritual pressure. The kingdom is built so that movement feels like obedience, even when the traveller is resisting. Bells point the way. Pilgrims repeat the direction. Settlements cluster near the upward road as if everyone has accepted that the only meaningful motion is ascent. Hornet, however, has been forced into this motion by capture. Her climb is not devotion. It is investigation, defiance, and eventually rescue. This gives the entire journey a quiet tension. She is following the same route as pilgrims, but she is not surrendering to the same story. Bone Bottom and the early settlements make Pharloom feel inhabited in a way that is different from Hallownest's ruins. Hallownest often feels like a kingdom after the last breath, where the few surviving minds echo inside abandoned systems. Pharloom is damaged, haunted, and cruel, but many of its people are still speaking, bargaining, singing, arguing, hoping, and getting by. That changes the moral feeling of the journey. Hornet is not only uncovering the record of a lost disaster, she is moving through an ongoing one. The suffering is not entirely historical. It is present, mundane, and repeated in small exchanges. A bench, a bellway, a shop, a wish, or a conversation can all show how ordinary bugs keep living inside a kingdom that has made their lives into fuel. Sherma's innocence belongs in this part of the lore because he represents a gentler version of pilgrimage. He is drawn upward, like many others, but his faith does not feel political or calculating. It feels young, hopeful, and almost painfully sincere. That sincerity makes him important. Silksong is not mocking every believer. It is not saying faith is foolish because institutions can become cruel. Instead, it separates the vulnerability of devotion from the machinery that exploits it. Sherma can be sweet and true at the same time that the Citadel is manipulative. That distinction keeps the story from becoming flat. Pharloom is tragic because real longing has been caught in a system that knows how to use longing for its own preservation. Chakra gives the journey a different kind of steadiness. She's a mapmaker, a hunter, a survivor, and someone looking for her own lost teacher. Through her, Pharloom becomes not only sacred territory but difficult territory, a place that must be charted carefully, because memory alone cannot hold every passage. Maps in this universe are always more than convenience. They represent the attempt to make a wounded world legible. Chakra's work pushes against the Citadel's mystical fog. Where the holy system turns roots into obedience, map-making turns roots into knowledge. there is a quiet freedom in that. To draw a place honestly is to say it can be understood without surrendering to its myth. Garmund and Zaza bring another shade of life to the road. Their presence reminds the story that not everyone in Pharloom is crushed into solemnity. Some characters remain theatrical, proud, odd, affectionate, or absurd in the middle of danger. This matters because a kingdom made only of grief would feel less alive. Silksong allows strange friendships and a little comic shapes to survive beside suffering, which makes the suffering feel more real other than less. A world under domination does not stop having foolishness, vanity, kindness, and small rituals of companionship. Those things continue, and their continuation becomes another kind of resistance. Belheart is one of the most important emotional centres of the early and middle journey. It is not simply a town with a problem to solve. It is a community caught by the very forces that define the larger kingdom: song, sleep, possession, and rescue. The idea of a town trapped under a curse makes Pharloom's danger intimate. The Citadel's influence is not only high above in marble and choir chambers, it reaches into homes, streets, and local memory. When Belheart changes, the change matters, because it shows that Hornet's journey can do more than climb toward a final confrontation. It can return breath to places that had nearly lost it. The Bell Beast is a beautiful piece of the kingdom's logic because it turns transportation into living myth. A bellway could have been only infrastructure, but in Pharloom it carries animal force, ritual weight, and danger. To move through the kingdom quickly is still to depend on something strange and half wild. The beast's presence also keeps bells from becoming purely decorative symbols. Bells in Pharloom are bodies, mouths, roots, calls, and burdens. They are part of how the land speaks. Their sound can invite, warn, move, and disturb. Hornet's relationship with the Bell Beast quietly teaches her that the kingdom's systems are never only mechanical. They are alive enough to suffer and be changed. Greymoor's wide sadness gives the ascent a different texture from the tight caves below. A moor is open, but not freeing. It can feel exposed, wet, heavy, and full of old waiting. In the lore, Greymoor is tied to silk drifting down from above, a landscape marked by the Citadel's waste, and the labour of those forced to collect what the Holy City discards. That image is powerful because it reverses the usual idea of holiness descending as blessing. In Pharloom, what falls from above can be residue, burden, and obligation. The lower lands do not receive grace, they receive the byproducts of power. The bugs who work with silk dregs show how a sacred substance can become industrial waste. Silk begins as divine material, a primal thread of a higher being. By the time it reaches the labourers below, it can be something to gather, sort, carry, sell, fear, or survive. This transformation from miracle to material is one of Pharloom's sharpest world-building ideas. The Citadel has taken an origin of life and turned it into supply. When a kingdom does that, everything begins to blur. Worship, mining, medicine, punishment, textile, food, and currency all become connected. The result is a society where theology is not hidden in books. It is stuck to workers' hands. Shelwood carries another memory of older life. Its connection to Nylith and older green power suggests that Pharloom once had forces rooted in growth, rather than silk. The forested spaces feel like the remains of a language almost overwritten by the Citadel's song. Trees, shells, spores, and tangled paths remember something slower than conquest. Nilith's fading presence matters because it shows that Grandmother Silk did not create meaning from nothing. She arrived in a land already full of powers and peoples. Her dominion was not creation alone, it was replacement. The old hearts are therefore not random relics. They are witnesses to what Pharloom was before the Pale Mother and her children remade it. The idea of old hearts gives Silksong a deeper sense of historical grief. A heart is not only a trophy from an ancient ruler, it is the remaining pulse of a lost order. When Hornet seeks these remnants, she is not merely collecting power to unlock a final answer. She is allowing buried histories to matter again. Crust, song, root, and green memory return as parts of Pharloom's full story. The Citadel tried to make one vertical narrative. All roads upward, all voices into the choir, all life toward the holy centre. The old hearts widen the story sideways and backward. They say that no empire, however bright, gets to be the only memory. The Crust King Khan gives the ancient past a harsher shape. His realm suggests armour, shell, warfare, and a power older than the Silk Order. Crust is protective, but it is also rigid. That makes him a fitting ancestor for a land where survival often hardens into cruelty. When Hornet confronts echoes of old rulers like Khan, she's moving through the layers of authority beneath the present one. Pharloom was not peaceful before Grandmother Silk, and the point is not to romanticize every fallen kingdom. The point is to understand that the Citadel's holy domination grew on top of earlier conflicts, inheritances, and wounds. A single tyrant rarely explains an entire ruined land. Scarsinger Carmelita gives old Pharloom the memory of performance and command through voice. Her title alone carries the feeling of song as power before the Citadel perfected song as institution. If Grandmother Silk's later order uses choir and prayer to bind a kingdom, Carmelita suggests that music in Pharloom has always had teeth. Song can gather a people, lead a march, frighten enemies, preserve memory, or make obedience feel beautiful. This helps explain why the Citadel's use of song is so effective. It is not an alien tool forced onto the land. It is an older language of power refined into a sacred machine. Verdania's ruined memory adds a tender, sorrowful counterpoint. The story of green inheritance and sacrifice feels like a small myth inside the larger myth. One more example of a kingdom trying to survive by offering up what it loves. The Green Prince matters because he embodies the terrible hope that one chosen life might buy safety for everyone else. In Hollow Knight, that hope produced the vessels and the Hollow Knight. In Pharloom, it echoes through old Verdania. Silksong keeps returning to this question because it is one of the universe's deepest wounds. How many rulers, parents, priests, and desperate survivors have convinced themselves that sacrificing the child, the servant, the prisoner, or the rival will make the world clean? The White Lady's shadow falls over Silksong even when she is not physically present through most of the journey. Hornet's memories of her connect Pharloom's problem to Hallownest's most intimate failures. The White Lady speaks with gentleness, but her gentleness cannot erase the horror of what she and the Pale King allowed. Hornet's anger toward that history is not simple rebellion. It is moral clarity. She understands that beautiful language, royal calm, and divine patience can still sit beside unbearable harm. That understanding prepares her to see through Pharloom's holy softness. She has already learned that pale beings can make atrocity sound like necessity. Hive Queen Vesper's place in Hornet's past gives another kind of training to the story. The Hive was a society with its own queen, discipline, and sealed independence, and Vesper's memory suggests that Hornet learned more than how to fight. She learned how authority can be embodied, how a queen's presence shapes a people, and how loyalty can become both strength and danger. When Hornet later faces the possibility of becoming a new Weaver Queen, that memory matters quietly. She has known queenhood as image, pressure, and command. She can understand its appeal without accepting its trap. Hera remains the deepest maternal absence in Hornet's life. Hera's bargain with the Pale King created Hornet, but also placed her inside the consequences of a kingdom-saving scheme built on sleep and seals. In Silksong, the pattern returns with unsettling symmetry. Grandmother Silk is a mother forced into sleep by her own children, and Lace is a daughter made to desire the mother's waking. Hornet moves between these mothers like someone tracing a family tree made of cages. Her own mother slept to hold a seal. Another mother sleeps because she has been sealed. Neither story is simple, and neither gives Hornet an easy model for what daughterhood should mean. Lace becomes more interesting when seen beside Hera and Hornet, rather than only beside Grandmother Silk. She's a child created for a purpose, bright, sharp, elegant, and unstable in the way a carefully made weapon can be unstable. She fights as if identity must be proven through motion. Her pride has fear inside it, because her existence depends on a mother whose love is also possession. Lace wants to defend the path upward, but the defense is not free. She is the loyal child that Grandmother Silk wanted after the Weavers betrayed her. That makes her dangerous, but it also makes her heartbreaking. Hornet and Lace are mirrors, but the mirror is cracked in useful ways. Hornet was born from a bargain between Hera and the Pale King, raised among powers that used children as instruments, and eventually became a protector who resists being owned by any kingdom. Lace was spun from a single mother's silk, created as a loyal answer to betrayal. Hornet has too many inheritances. Lace has one inheritance that tries to become her whole self. Their duels are therefore not only tests of skill, they are arguments between two daughters about what it means to be made by power and still claim a will. The second confrontation with Lace near the upper story carries a different feeling from the first. Earlier, she can seem like a stylish rival, almost a guardian of the road. Later, the stakes have narrowed. Hornet is closer to the truth, and Lace is closer to the mother she was made to serve. The fight becomes less like a challenge and more like a defense mechanism inside the kingdom's body. Lace stands where the system needs her to stand. Hornet must pass, but the passing is not triumph over evil. It is the painful movement of one bound daughter, forcing another bound daughter to reveal the shape of the binding. Grandmother Silk herself is best understood as both victim and threat. If she were only a monster, Pharloom would be simpler. If she were only a wronged mother, the Citadel would be the only villain. But Silksong refuses that comfort. Grandmother Silk is bound, harvested, hidden, and desperate to wake, which makes her suffering real. At the same time, her waking desire threatens to bind the kingdom into one devotion, dissolving individual wills into her own need. She has been wronged, and she is dangerous. Her pain does not guarantee mercy. This is one of the mature things about the law. Wounded power can still become oppressive power. The haunting gives that danger a form. It is not ordinary madness and not a simple plague. It is a disturbance moving through silk, song, shell, memory and body. Bugs become snared by something that is both divine and intimate, because Grandmother Silk's threads are already woven through Pharloom's systems. This is why the kingdom's own dependence becomes its vulnerability. The Citadel used her silk everywhere, and when she began to stir, those same channels became pathways for possession. A society built on extracted power eventually learns that extracted power may still have a will of its own. Whitewood and the physicians deepen the horror by connecting medicine to control. If silk can prolong life, repair bodies, or hold shells together, it offers hope to those who are sick or broken. But in a kingdom ruled by a hidden silk source, healing can become another doorway for domination. The body that receives sacred thread may also receive a hidden line back to the mother. This does not make healing evil. It makes the system around healing morally dangerous. Pharloom turns even care into a place where power can enter. That is why its cruelty feels so complete. It does not only punish, it offers help with strings attached. The whispering vaults give memory a colder shape. A vault preserves, but it also hides. Whispering suggests that what is stored there has not fully gone silent. Pharloom's upper institutions collect not only goods and prayers, but secrets, songs, records, and old names. The Vaultborn and their surrounding lore feel like guardians of a knowledge that has become detached from mercy. This is what happens when a holy system values preservation more than liberation. It can remember everything except why the remembered lives mattered. Hornet's passage through such places feels like moving through archives that would rather keep a wound labelled than let it heal. Memoriam carries the same idea in a more sacred register. Memory in Silksong is never just the past. It can be used to bind, instruct, awaken or mislead. The Citadel depends on controlled memory. Pilgrims remember the call but not the trap. Workers remember guilt but not justice. Worshippers remember songs but not the being hidden behind them. When Hornet enters spaces shaped by memory, she is entering the kingdom's argument over what may be known. The lore is not buried simply because time passed. Much of it is buried because someone benefited from selective forgetting. The choral chambers make the voice into architecture. A chamber built for song is already a place where bodies are arranged by sound. The voices of the faithful become part of the building's function, almost like beams, pipes, or threads. That image is lovely and frightening at once. Singing can be communal, tender, and beautiful, but it can also erase the singer into the choir. Pharloom's high religion wants voices joined in a way that no longer leaves room for dissent. Hornet's own voice cuts against that. She speaks as an individual, sometimes sharply, in spaces designed to dissolve individuality into harmony. The reeds and choristers show hierarchy inside devotion. Not every singer stands in the same place. Some lead, some echo, some maintain, some obey, and some become almost faceless extensions of the holy order. This is how institutions survive beyond the original crime. Grandmother Silk's imprisonment may have begun with the weavers, but later generations inherit roles that keep the prison functioning, even when they do not understand its origin. A cruel system does not require every participant to know the whole truth. It only requires enough people to keep singing their assigned part. The Grand Gate and the upper entrances of the Citadel work symbolically, because gates pretend to be thresholds of welcome while also deciding who is worthy to pass. Pilgrims dream of crossing upward into holiness, but a gate can also be a mouth that consumes them. Hornet's approach to these spaces carries the feeling of breaking into a truth that has been carefully framed as sacred arrival. The architecture says, "Enter and be transformed." The hidden reality says, "Enter and be used." That difference between promise and function is where Pharloom's tragedy lives. The cogwork core makes the Citadel's mechanical nature explicit. Beneath ritual and song there is engineering. Gears, systems, lifts, channels, and hidden operations remind us that domination is not sustained by belief alone. It needs maintenance. Someone has to build the devices, repair the paths, manage the flow of silk, organize labour, and keep the holy city operating. This is why the Citadel feels so convincing. It is not a vague evil temple. It is a functioning institution with spiritual, economic, mechanical and political parts all turning together. Hornet's climb exposes those parts one by one. The slab is Pharloom's shame made into stone. It is not only a prison in the ordinary sense, it is a place where guilt becomes geography. The old penitent's presence suggests punishment that has lasted so long it has become identity. This is one of the saddest forms of control, when someone no longer needs a guard because the sentence has moved inside them. Pharloom's religion understands how to make bugs carry their own cages. Hornet's resistance matters because she does not accept guilt as proof of holiness. She has seen too much sacrifice dressed up as duty to trust suffering just because it has been sanctified. The guard flies and inherited guilt around the slab add a generational ache to the story. Punishment can outlive the original crime. Families, castes, and servants can inherit roles connected to guilt they did not choose. That makes the prison feel less like a building and more like a social disease. The Citadel does not simply lock away bodies. It creates categories of being: penitent, guard, sinner, worker, singer, pilgrim, holy vessel. Once those categories settle, people begin to mistake them for nature. Hornet's very existence disrupts that mistake, because she carries many categories and refuses to be reduced to one. The blasted steps near the kingdom's edge make exile and entry feel like the same road viewed from opposite directions. For one bug, the steps may be the beginning of pilgrimage. For another, they may be the only escape. The harshness of that area matters because Pharloom is not gently enclosed. It is surrounded by wasteland, difficulty, and dangerous thresholds. Leaving the kingdom is not as simple as deciding the Citadel is false. Systems of control often survive because exit is costly, confusing, or almost impossible. The road upward is marked. The road out is not always clear. Bilewater gives the lower world its most physical disgust. Pollution, rot, and poisoned flow show what the Citadel's order does to the body of the land. A kingdom's theology can sound abstract until its waste reaches the water. Then the truth becomes undeniable. Something above is producing sickness below. The Stilkin's anger belongs here because rage can be a form of clear perception. They may seem hostile, but their hostility is rooted in a world made foul by a sacred centre that refuses responsibility for what it dumps beneath itself. The putrefied ducts make the kingdom's hidden circulation visible. Ducts carry what polite architecture does not want to display. Waste, pressure, fluids, smells, and unwanted life move through them. In Pharloom, these spaces help reveal that the shining city is connected to everything it pretends to stand above. The Citadel cannot float cleanly over the suffering it creates. There are pipes, drains, leaks, and infected passages tying high holiness to low contamination. Hornet's journey through such places turns sanitation into law. The kingdom's filth is not incidental, it is evidence. Fleetopia and the fleas offer a lighter countercurrent, but even that lightness matters. The fleas are vulnerable, scattered, and often absurdly placed, yet gathering them builds a small alternative to the Citadel's model of community. Their caravan is not a holy institution or a royal court. It is a moving collection of little lives trying to find a safer place together. That gentler community stands against the Citadel's forced unity. One gathers through care, the other gathers through compulsion. Silksong often lets its side stories carry this kind of moral contrast without announcing it too loudly. Pale Lake feels like a boundary between contamination and revelation. Pale imagery in Hollow Knight's universe is rarely neutral. It suggests old divinity, royal influence, luminous authority, and the cold beauty of beings who remake the world around themselves. A lake can reflect, conceal, drown, and preserve. When Silksong places important late road tasks near pale water, it draws on the entire emotional history of pale power. Hornet is never simply far from Hallownest. She carries Hallownest's pale inheritance into a land shaped by another pale being, and every pale shimmer can feel like recognition and warning at once. Mount Fae gives the ascent an almost spiritual exhaustion. Cold heights tend to strip stories down. In a warm town, faith can be social, noisy, and supported by others. On a high mountain, faith becomes breath, distance, and the question of whether the climb still means anything. Pharloom's vertical structure needs that kind of place. It reminds us that the road to holiness is physically punishing even before the truth of the Citadel is revealed. The mountain does not care about doctrine. It tests bodies. It makes the pilgrim's longing meet wind, ice, and silence. The nameless town above Pharloom is one of the quietest and most chilling pieces of the backstory. A place without a name feels like a place history has already begun to erase. If its people were drawn below by Weaver promises, then its emptiness becomes the footprint of seduction. The town does not need a dramatic battle scene to be disturbing. Its absence is enough. It suggests that the Citadel's call can hollow out communities without appearing as invasion. A promise descends, people follow, and one day the roofs and paths remain while the voices are gone. Weave Nest Atla adds a more intimate kind of Weaver history. A nest is home, birthplace, archive, and trap at once. The Weavers of Pharloom were not only villains arranging a prison for their mother, they were also a people with fear, ambition, art, failure, and survival instincts. Their tools and settings suggest a culture that understood silk so deeply it could make the world answer to thread. That knowledge is beautiful, and that beauty is part of the danger. Silksong understands that domination often comes from skill turned inward, from craft used without humility. The snare setter is one of the clearest symbols of Weaver contradiction. It is a tool made to trap a higher power, a device of rebellion against the mother who could never be fully escaped. The Weavers needed Grandmother Silk's silk and feared her sovereignty. They benefited from her sleep, but knew her claim remained underneath everything. A snare is not liberation in the pure sense. It is another binding, another attempt to solve domination through a more clever form of domination. When Hornet later uses such a tool, the story makes that moral danger visible. The trap may be necessary, but it is not innocent. The caretaker's role is uneasy because he offers a plan that seems more merciful than Hornet becoming a vessel for Grandmother Silk's power. Yet his plan still depends on dangerous forces, hidden knowledge, and the use of souls. He is not simply a saviour standing outside Pharloom's corruption. He is part of the kingdom's long habit of solving one binding with another. This makes him interesting. In desperate worlds, good intentions often inherit bad tools. The soul snare path may be the only way to open the road toward the truest rescue, but it begins by repeating an old pattern. Make a trap, bind the power, hope the consequences can be managed. The chapel maid and the bell hermit help make the soul snare feel like a community act rather than a lone heroic invention. Their involvement brings quieter, humbler figures into the centre of the ending. Pharloom is not saved only by royal blood, ancient power, or a warrior's skill. It is also saved by caretakers, hermits, chapel keepers, lost souls, and strange small survivals that the Citadel's main story would overlook. This matters because the Citadel's hierarchy values voices according to holy function. The true ending gathers value from below and aside, from those who remained close to suffering rather than those who ruled above it. The Seeker's soul from the polluted depths carries a similar weight. A soul drawn from bile water or nearby corruption is not clean in the ceremonial sense, but it is necessary. This reverses the Citadel's own purity logic. Salvation does not come only from the high, white, polished places. It also comes from the foul, abandoned and angry places where the kingdom tried to hide its consequences. By making such a soul part of the trap, Silksong lets the lower land answer the upper land. What was discarded becomes part of the force that breaks the centre. The snared silk ending is powerful because it is both success and disaster. Hornet avoids simply taking Grandmother Silk's place. The trap works. The old monarch is dragged toward the void. Lace intervenes and cuts Hornet free. For a moment it looks as if the worst ending has been avoided. Then the deeper consequence opens. The void does not remain politely contained. It follows the silk lines, seeps through the kingdom, and turns rescue into catastrophe. This is exactly the kind of consequence Hollow Knight's universe loves. A solution that is real, brave, and still incomplete, because power does not disappear just because someone found a clever ritual. Act 3 changes the meaning of everything before it. Pharloom after snared silk is not merely more dangerous. It is revealed as a kingdom whose hidden connections have become wounds. The silk threads that once helped bind the mother and sustain the Citadel now conduct the dark upward. The structure of control becomes the structure of infection. That is bitterly fitting. A society built around lines of extraction cannot be surprised when those same lines carry ruin back through the system. The void does not invade a healthy world from nowhere. It enters through the channels Pharloom already made. The abyss in Silksong cannot be separated from the abyss in Hallownest. For Hornet, the void is not an abstract element. It is connected to her siblings, to the vessels, to the failed plan of the Pale King, and to the silent knight who once moved through Hallownest's deepest dark. Descending toward the abyss in Pharloom is therefore not only a geographical reversal of the climb, It is a return to the family wound Hornet has never been able to ignore. At the top of Pharloom, she faces a bound mother. Beneath Pharloom, she faces the darkness that swallowed her siblings. The Everbloom brings the flower motif into Silksong's darkest place. A flower is fragile, but in this universe, fragility can have strange authority. The delicate flower in Hollow Night already suggested that some forms of purity or life can resist the void in ways violence cannot. The Everbloom carries that idea forward with greater urgency. It does not conquer the dark by being stronger in the ordinary sense. It creates a little condition where rescue is possible. That is a beautiful answer to a story full of cages, blades, traps, and royal schemes. Sometimes the counterforce to cosmic darkness is not a sharper weapon, but a living bloom that refuses to be dissolved. Red Memory is one of the most important late revelations because it gathers Hornet's past into a trial of identity. Memories of Hera, Vesper, the White Lady, Hallownest, and the Pale King's legacy do not appear as nostalgic decoration. They force Hornet to confront the forces that shaped her before Pharloom ever called. She cannot save another kingdom by pretending she has no history. She has to pass through that history, feel its pressure, and still choose her own act. Memory becomes not a chain, but a chamber where chains can be named. The confrontation with the White Lady in Memory is especially sharp because it brings motherhood, complicity, and gentleness into one uneasy space. The White Lady can sound sorrowful, even loving in a distant way, but Hornet knows that sorrow after atrocity is not the same as repair. The vessels were children of a divine plan, discarded into the dark because a kingdom needed a perfect container. Hornet's refusal to accept that logic becomes the moral seed of the true ending. She will not save Pharloom by agreeing that another child must be left behind. Hera's memory offers a different kind of guidance. Hera is fierce, political, and bound to her own terrible bargain, yet she is also the mother whose existence makes Hornet more than a pale ruler's design. In Red Memory, Hera can be felt as the force that tells Hornet not to dissolve into someone else's destiny. The Beast's legacy is not purity. It is survival, will, and the right to choose teeth over obedience when the world demands surrender. Hornet needs that inheritance in Pharloom, because the kingdom offers her a crown that would be another cage. Vesper's presence turns training into memory of sovereignty. The Hive's queen is proud and self-contained, and her influence on Hornet suggests that discipline does not have to mean submission to a corrupt power. A blade, a needle, a stance, or a code can become an expression of self rather than a tool of a master. This helps separate Hornet's martial strength from the Citadel's violence. She fights, but she does not fight to own. She cuts, but in the final movement, she cuts to free. That distinction is the difference between becoming a new tyrant and becoming someone who can leave the kingdom breathing. When the night appears in the true ending, the moment feels quiet precisely because so much history stands behind it. The night does not need a speech. Its body carries the abyss, the vessels, the Pale King's failure, the Radiance's end, and Hornet's complicated recognition of kin. Its arrival turns the rescue into a family answer across 2 games. Hornet could not rescue all the siblings lost beneath Hallownest. She can rescue Lace now, and the dark sibling helps her do it. That does not erase the past. It gives the past a gentler echo than it had before. Lost lace is frightening because the void has taken a figure already made of another power's thread. She becomes a knot of both forces, silk-born and dark-possessed, daughter and danger, rival and rescue. Fighting her is not the same emotional act as defeating Grandmother Silk. Grandmother Silk represents the central source of Pharloom's domination. Lost Lace represents someone caught in the aftermath of trying to remove that source. Hornet's goal is not to destroy Lace as an enemy, but to reclaim her from the dark. That changes the meaning of the final battle. Victory is measured by whether someone can be brought back. Grandmother Silk's final act of giving silk after Lost Lace is defeated complicates her one last time. She is not redeemed into pure tenderness, and the damage she caused does not vanish. But in that moment she gives Hornet what is needed to carry Lace out. The mother who wanted devotion, possession, and waking becomes, at the edge of the void, a source of escape for her child. That is not a neat forgiveness. It is a final contradictory gesture from a being who was always both wounded and dangerous. Silksong is stronger for allowing that contradiction to remain. The relationship between Silk and Void gives the game a mythic balance. Silk binds, shapes, heals, and preserves. Void dissolves, consumes, unifies, and negates. Neither is purely good or evil. Silk can save Lace, but Silk also cages Grandmother Silk and enslaves Pharloom. Void can destroy the Radiance and rescue Hornet, but Void can also corrupt Lace and tear Pharloom apart. The moral question is never simply which power is pure, it is how power is used, who controls it, and whether living beings are treated as instruments or kin. Pharloom and Hallownest mirror each other without being the same kingdom. Hallownest fell to infection born from a forgotten light god, a radiance erased by the Pale King's rule. Pharloom falls to a haunting tied to silk, song, and a bound pale mother. Hallownest's solution was a hollow child sealed in darkness. Pharloom's solution was a singing cage built around a sleeping mother. Both kingdoms hide a divine problem beneath civic order. Both use sacrifice and forgetting. Both leave children to carry the consequences. Hornet stands between them, carrying the memory of one ruined kingdom into another. The Knight and Hornet therefore represent two different answers to divine failure. The Knight is born from the Pale King's atrocity and becomes, depending on the ending, the focus of Void strong enough to destroy the Radiance. Hornet is born from political bargain and Weaver blood, then becomes strong enough to reject both Pale rulership and sacrificial logic. The Knight is silence from the abyss. Hornet is voice, silk, and motion. In Sister of the Void, they meet not as rivals but as siblings whose different powers complete the rescue. Lace completes the sibling pattern in a different way. She's not Hornet's sibling by Hallownest blood, but she becomes sister-like through the structure of the ending. She's another's daughter shaped by a mother and a kingdom, another sharp warrior caught in inherited purpose. Saving Lace is Hornet's way of refusing to repeat the old pattern of leaving children in the dark. The true ending's title does not have to mean only literal family. It means chosen kinship against cosmic abandonment. Even the game's side characters support this broader meaning. Pilby shows innocent pilgrimage. Loam shows exploited labour. The Old Penitent shows internalized guilt. Seamstress shows the possibility of turning a weapon's discipline toward repair. The Stillkin show the anger of polluted lower regions. The The caretaker shows knowledge mixed with manipulation. The snail shamans show magical ambition and sacrifice. Each is a small thread in Pharloom's fabric. None alone explains the kingdom, but together they show how a society can be bound from many directions at once. The tone of Silksong is different from Hollow Knight, because Hornet is different from the night. The night's silence made Hallownest feel like a place being witnessed by an empty vessel. Hornet speaks, judges, refuses, jokes dryly, and challenges the beings around her. This changes the law's emotional texture. Pharloom is not only discovered, it is argued with. Hornet's voice matters because she can name injustice when she sees it. She does not drift through the kingdom as a blank recipient of law. She pushes back against the world. Her needlein is the perfect symbol of that difference. It is an instrument, a key, a weapon of revelation, and a way of communicating with memory. The knight used the dream nail to cut into hidden thoughts and dreams. Hornet uses music. This is a beautiful shift. In Hallownest, truth was often accessed by piercing dreams. In Pharloom, truth is often accessed by answering song with song. Hornet does not simply listen to the kingdom's music. She plays back into it, altering what can be heard. The rosary economy also matters. Rosaries are currency, prayer objects, and symbols of devotion. Using rosaries as money makes faith part of commerce. Benches, services, tools, and rest become tied to beads of sacred value. This is a subtle but important world-building choice. Pharloom's religion is not separate from its economy. The objects of prayer circulate through purchase and labour. The sacred becomes transactional, and the transactional becomes sacred. It is one more way the Citadel's order enters daily life. Tools and crests in Silksong can also be read as law. Hornet's changing crest represent different styles of movement, combat, and identity. She adapts to Pharloom by changing how she carries herself. Tools are crafted, equipped, and repaired, often tied to the bugs and materials of the land. This makes Hornet's power feel less like a single inherited destiny and more like a practice of adaptation. She is weaver-born and pale-touched, but she survives by learning the local textures of Pharloom, its metals, shells, traps, threads, songs, and hidden roots. The repeated idea of binding is everywhere. Grandmother Silk is bound. Prisoners are bound by guilt. Workers are bound by debt and doctrine. Pilgrims are bound by call. Hornet can bind enemies through silk. The Weaver Queen ending binds Grandmother Silk into Hornet. Snared Silk tries to bind through the void. The true ending breaks the pattern not by refusing all bonds, but by changing their nature. Hornet's final bond with Lace and the Night is not domination. It is rescue, recognition, and return. This is why the true ending feels like a better answer than simply destroying Grandmother Silk. Destruction alone would repeat the simplicity of conquest. Binding alone would repeat the cage. Abandonment would repeat the cruelty of Hallownest's abyss. Hornet's best answer is harder. Enter danger, retrieve the lost, accept help from a sibling of darkness, and leave rulership behind. It is not a perfect political program for Pharloom, but it is a moral refusal of the old pattern. No more children thrown away, no more daughters reduced to instruments, no more holy cage treated as peace. The final image of Hornet and Lace surviving carries a quiet humour and relief, but also enormous aftermath. Lace can laugh because she has lived, perhaps because mockery is easier than gratitude. perhaps because she has been pulled back from the end she claimed to want. Hornet's stare says everything her words do not need to. Their relationship is not suddenly soft, but it has changed. They have passed through the void together and returned. Some bonds are not gentle at first. Some begin as rivalry, sharpen into sacrifice, and only later become something like trust. Pharloom after Sister of the Void is a kingdom without its old song. That can be frightening. The song was oppressive, but it also structured life. When a cruel system ends, the people who lived inside it must learn how to live without the roles it gave them. Workers must learn rest. Pilgrims must learn direction without holy compulsion. Prisoners must learn that shame is not a home. The lower lands must heal from pollution. The Citadel must become something other than a mouth. The ending opens that possibility, but it does not pretend the work is complete. This open aftermath is very consistent with Hollow Knight. Dream No More does not show Hallownest instantly rebuilt. It shows the radiance destroyed and the infection ended, leaving silence and possibility. Sister of the Void does something similar for Pharloom. The central domination is broken. The catastrophe is answered, but the future is left to the survivors. Team Cherry's endings often understand that salvation is not the same as restoration. A kingdom can be freed from its god and still have to learn how to live. Hornet's personal future is also open. Does she return to Hallownest? Does she remain in Pharloom for a time? Does she watch over Lace? Does she become something between kingdoms, no longer only Hallownest's protector, but a wanderer who has seen two divine failures? The game does not give a tidy answer. That silence is appropriate. Hornet's whole arc is about refusing predetermined roles. A final paragraph assigning her a neat destiny would betray the point. She has earned the right to move beyond the web without a narrator tying the last knot. The standard ending, often understood through the image of the Weaver Queen, is disturbing because it looks like resolution while repeating the system's deepest mistake. Hornet defeats Grandmother Silk and binds the higher being's power, but the result does not feel like liberation. It feels like inheritance hardening into destiny. The kingdom loses one central mother only to gain another figure caught in the same web of command. Hornet's body and nature are pulled toward the very role she has been resisting, and Pharloom remains organized around a ruling thread. This ending is tragic because it does not require Hornet to become cruel in an ordinary way. It only requires her to accept the old shape of power and place herself inside it. What makes the Weaver Queen ending especially painful is that it takes Hornet's strength and turns it against her freedom. All through the journey, her quickness, judgment, and silk are signs of agency. She uses what she inherited without being swallowed by inheritance. But in this ending, the inheritance wins. Weaver blood, pale lineage, royal consequence, and Pharloom's hunger for a sovereign all converge. Hornet becomes the answer the kingdom knows how to understand. A new ruling figure at the centre of the web. The tragedy is quiet because it almost resembles victory. The monster is defeated, the climb is completed, and yet the pattern is still alive. The Twisted Child ending is stranger and more bodily. The curse of the twisted bud changes the final confrontation into something rooted, wooden, parasitic and unsettling. Where the Weaver Queen ending is about royal and divine inheritance, this path feels like corruption through growth. Plant imagery usually suggests renewal, but here it becomes invasion, bursting, and transformation without consent. Hornet and Grandmother Silk are caught in a hybrid fate that feels less like a crown and more like a biological accident. The ending reminds us that not every escape from one system produces freedom. Sometimes refusing one web only leads into another form of possession. The unused or cut strung to serve material is worth mentioning gently, because it reveals how close the story's possibilities came to an even darker fusion. The idea of a form combining traits of Hornet and Grandmother Silk, haunting Pharloom through silk, shows the same fear from another angle. What if Hornet did not simply replace the mother? And what if the mother did not simply die, but the two became a new instrument of domination? Even as unused material, it helps clarify the nightmare behind the official endings. The danger is not just death. The danger is being made into the perfect shape for a kingdom's old hunger. Passing of the age, the secret coda tied to Mr. Mushroom, carries a different kind of lore energy. It belongs to the wider Hollow Knight habit of letting absurdity brush against cosmic mystery. Mr. Mushroom has always felt like a wandering punctuation mark from somewhere outside ordinary history, a small figure whose departures suggest that kingdoms are not the whole universe. His presence in Pharloom lightly connects the lands without forcing every mystery into one rigid timeline. After all the heavy themes of mothers, daughters, cages, void and song, his strange passage reminds the world that there are still travellers moving beyond the borders of tragedy. The fact that Silksong can hold both Grandmother Silk and Mr. Mushroom in the same universe is part of its charm. One belongs to deep myth, monarchy, divine thread, and imprisonment. The other belongs to sideways movement, odd speech, and secret continuation. Together they keep the lore from becoming too sealed. Pharloom is enormous while Hornet is inside it, but it is not everything. Hallownest was not everything either. The world beyond these kingdoms remains large, quiet, and partly ridiculous in the old fairy tale sense, where the strangest figure may be the one least impressed by gods and rulers. Another quiet layer of the lore is the way wishes work. A wish is not exactly a quest in the emotional sense. It is a need spoken into the world. Pharloom is full of needs: rescue, repair, gathering, memory, homes, roots, lost companions, and small improvements that do not change the entire kingdom, but matter deeply to one bug or one community. Completing wishes before the snared silk path gives the true ending moral weight. Hornet does not earn the deeper root merely by finding secret power. She earns it by becoming involved with the lives of Pharloom's people. The kingdom becomes worth saving because she has answered its little human-scale, bug-scale cries. This is why the true root would feel weaker if it were only a hidden boss chain. Its power comes from the accumulation of care. The large mythology of Grandmother Silk sits above everything, but the way into the deeper ending runs through ordinary acts. A home opened in Bellheart, fleas gathered, soul sought, small troubles settled, roads revisited, and overlooked figures helped. That structure says something important about Hornet's difference from the rulers she confronts. Pale kings and higher beings think in seals, vessels, monarchs, and grand designs. Hornet's final rescue is made possible because she has taken the time to answer particular lives. The word sister in Sister of the Void is therefore doing more than one thing. It points toward Hornet and the Night, sibling through the Pale King and the Abyss's history. It points toward Hornet and Lace, Not sisters by blood, but joined by parallel wounds and rescue. It even points toward a broader kinship with those who were thrown into systems they did not choose. Sisterhood here is not soft sentiment placed over horror. It is a refusal to leave another child of power alone in the dark. The ending matters because Hornet's final answer to inherited violence is not a better throne. It is kinship strong enough to climb out with someone else. Silksong also changes how Hornet's needle feels. In Hollow Knight, her needle often appeared as a sign of warning, testing and defence. In Pharloom, it becomes part of a more complicated language. It can strike, stitch, bind, play, cut and save. The same object can be weapon, tool, instrument and thread carrier. That versatility fits Hornet perfectly. She's not a pure knight, not a pure princess, not a pure priestess, not a pure monster, and not a pure saviour. She's a moving intersection of roles, and her needle carries that mixed identity through every chamber. The needle-in gives the needle a voice. It is one of the most elegant lore ideas in the game, because it turns Hornet's weapon into music without making it less dangerous. A blade that can sing belongs in a kingdom where song is both beauty and control. When Hornet plays, she does not simply join the choir. She interrupts it, answers it, activates hidden things, and draws buried memory into the open. Her music is not obedience. It is a counter-song. Pharloom has been ruled by arranged voices, and Hornet brings a sharper, lonelier note that can break the surface of ritual. The idea of countersong helps explain why the ending is not silence alone. Destroying the old song would be simple if all song were evil, but Silksong is too careful for that. Song can oppress, but song can also remember, call for help, comfort the frightened, or speak where ordinary words fail. The problem is not that Pharloom sings. The problem is that Pharloom has been forced to sing one dominating melody around a hidden wound. Hornet's journey opens the possibility of many voices again, voices not gathered into a single mind or a single mother's desire. Rosaries deserve one more look because they make devotion touch the hand. A rosary is something counted, held, spent, dropped, and recovered. It connects prayer to repetition and value to physical beads. In Pharloom, carrying rosaries means carrying a little chain of sacred economy. Losing them can feel like losing safety, but collecting them can also feel like participating in the kingdom's devotional commerce. This is world building at its most subtle. The currency itself says that the Holy Order has entered the pocket. Faith has become spendable, and spending has become a tiny act of faith. Benches in Pharloom are less innocent because of this economy. Rest can require payment, and that small friction says a lot about the kingdom. In many stories, rest is a refuge outside the system. Here, even refuge can be priced. That does not make every bench cruel, but it gives rest a social meaning. The weary body must pay the holy economy before it can pause. For a kingdom of pilgrims and workers, that is devastatingly appropriate. Pharloom does not only demand movement, it learns how to charge for stillness. The wishboards and little communities push back against that by making need visible. A board says, someone here requires help, and the request remains in public until answered. That is very different from the Citadel's hidden machinery. The Citadel conceals the true source of its power, but a wishboard displays ordinary need plainly. In that sense, local community is more honest than holy authority. It does not pretend suffering is sacred. It says the roof leaks, The friend is lost. The creature is missing. The road is dangerous. The town needs help. Such plainness becomes its own moral beauty. Hornet's sharp personality keeps the story from dissolving into pure melancholy. She's often impatient, proud, suspicious, and direct. That edge is necessary. A softer hero might be absorbed by Pharloom's music. Hornet's instinct to challenge gives the lore a spine. She does not automatically honour every ancient power because it is ancient. She does not accept every ritual because it is ritual. She can be moved, but she is not easily seduced. In a kingdom built from calls, songs, bells, and promises, skepticism is not coldness, it is survival. That skepticism is also why Hornet's compassion carries weight. She is not kind because she is naive. She is kind after knowing exactly how systems use kindness, faith, and sacrifice. When she helps, it is not because she believes every story she hears. It is because she recognizes that living beings should not be abandoned to machinery, monarchy, or darkness. Her care has teeth in it. That is the kind of care Pharloom needs. Not a gentle acceptance of suffering, but a fierce refusal to let suffering be renamed as destiny. The larger Hollow Knight universe often asks whether identity can survive the purposes imposed on it. The Knight was meant to be hollow, and yet the story's emotional force comes from the feeling that something like will, memory, or attachment persists. Hornet was meant to be daughter, seal consequence, protector, and perhaps in Pharloom a new vessel for another divine order. Lace was meant to be loyal child. Grandmother Silk was meant by her children to sleep and provide. Everywhere, beings are given functions. The most moving moments arrive when someone exceeds the function. Silksong's lore is therefore not only about ancient history, it is about the pain of being explained too completely by others. A kingdom says you are worker. A mother says you are loyal child. A ruler says you are vessel. A church says you are voice. A prison says you are guilty. A bloodline says you are heir. Hornet's climb is a long refusal of these final definitions. She does not become undefined, because she still carries history, silk, family, and memory. But she becomes more than the definitions. She chooses which threads to keep and which to cut. This is the gentle centre of the entire story. Freedom in Silksong is not isolation from every bond. Hornet does not win by having no mother, no sibling, no kingdom, no past, and no thread. She wins by changing the meaning of bonds. A thread can bind a prisoner, but it can also pull someone from danger. A song can erase a voice, but it can also call truth out of hiding. A family can be a chain, but it can also be the hand that reaches into the dark. The difference is consent, mercy, and the refusal to turn another life into a tool. There is also a quiet difference between inheritance and responsibility. Inheritance is what Hornet receives without asking. The Pale King's blood, Hera's bargain, Weaver ancestry, the memory of Hallownest, the presence of siblings lost to the abyss, and the attention of a kingdom that recognizes something useful in her silk. Responsibility is what she chooses after receiving all of that. She could let inheritance decide the shape of her ending. She could become queen, vessel, tool, or avenger. Instead, the truest path asks her to turn inherited power toward a responsibility that is not glamorous. Help the living, remember the dead, and refuse the easy crown. That is why Pharloom's lore feels so vertical and so intimate at the same time. The big structure is enormous. Old kingdoms under old kingdoms, a citadel over a sleeping god, void under the earth, bells above the pilgrim road, and memories reaching back into Hallownest. But the emotional structure is close to the body. Breath, thread, hunger, fatigue, guilt, payment, song, hands, needles, cocoons and flowers carry the meaning. The scale may be mythic, yet the pain is felt in small physical things. A kingdom can be understood through its gods, but it can also be understood through who is allowed to rest. Pharloom's greatest lie is that suffering becomes clean when it is given a holy name. The underworks call labour purification. The slab calls punishment penitence. The Citadel calls extraction devotion. The choir calls control harmony. The pilgrimage calls compulsion ascent. Against all of that, Hornet's journey insists that names do not wash away harm. A cage is still a cage when it is built from silk. A prison is still a prison when it echoes with song. A sacrifice is still terrible when the room around it is beautiful. This is the moral clarity that keeps the story from drifting into empty mystery. Yet the story also refuses bitterness as its final note. It could end by saying every song is manipulation, every mother is danger, every kingdom deserves collapse, and every bond is a trap. Instead, the true ending leaves room for rescue. Lace can be saved. The knight can return not as a weapon alone, but as a sibling presence. Grandmother Silk can be terrible, and still give the last thread needed for escape. Flowers can resist darkness. Communities can survive after the center breaks. The old song can end without the world becoming silent forever. So the lore comes to rest on a simple but tender reversal. Pharloom spends ages pulling beings upward into service, but Hornet's final meaningful movement is to go downward for someone else. The kingdom says rise, rise, rise until the voice becomes a command. Hornet descends. She goes below the Citadel, below the victory that almost was, below the safe ending, below even the old fear of void, because someone is trapped there. That downward mercy answers the whole upward machine. It says that the highest act is not always ascent. Sometimes it is the willingness to enter the dark and carry another life back. The entire lore of Silksong, then, can be felt as a climb through false holiness toward a deeper choice. At the bottom, Hornet is captured and displaced. In the middle, she discovers pilgrims, workers, prisons, bells, songs, old rulers, and a citadel that feeds on faith. At the top, she finds the sleeping pale mother whose body powers the system. Beneath the top, she finds the void and the consequences of trying to cage power with power. In memory, she finds the old wounds of Hallownest. In the true ending, she chooses rescue over rule. That is the arc in its simplest shape, but the beauty of the lore is that it is not simple while you are inside it. Pharloom is made of fragments, plaques, corpses, songs, wishes, tool descriptions, side characters, hidden rooms, boss memories, and endings that reinterpret each other. Like Hallownest, it asks the mind to weave a story from threads, rather than receive a clean history book. That is fitting. A game about silk should make lore feel woven. The pattern is visible only when enough threads have been followed, and even then some parts remain shadowed. The most peaceful way to hold Silksong's story is not to solve every uncertainty, but to feel the direction of its moral movement. Hornet begins as a captive, and ends as someone who refuses captivity for others. Pharloom begins as a kingdom singing a cage and ends in the truest path, with that song broken. Lace begins as a rival, and becomes someone worth saving. The night begins as an absent memory of Hallownest, and returns as a sibling force in the dark. grandmother Silk begins as hidden source and final terror, but even she is complicated by motherhood, rage, and imprisonment. Nothing is only one thing, and now as the story grows quieter, we can let Pharloom rest in the Ain like a distant vertical kingdom. Moss below, bells above, pilgrims climbing, workers breathing in dim underworks, old kings sleeping in memory, Silk drifting through air, and Hornet moving upward with her needle drawn. The citadel shines, but the shine no longer hides everything. The song is beautiful, but now we know what it was holding. Somewhere below all songs, the void waits. Somewhere beyond the void, a flower's pale light remains. And between all those powers stands Hornet, daughter of Hallownest, child of Silk, sister of the dark, choosing not to rule, but to cut a path toward freedom. So let the bells fade gently now, let the threads loosen, let the pilgrim step down from the road of endless service. Let the old cocoon hang empty in the quiet cradle. Let lace breathe again under a sky that no longer belongs entirely to her mother. Let the night sink back into shadow with its silent work complete. And let Hornet stand for a moment at the edge of Pharloom, not trapped by blood, not crowned by conquest, not swallowed by the dark, but alive, awake, and unbound. The kingdom has been sung, the silk has been cut, and the night can carry the rest softly into sleep.